Hello again. Welcome back to What Once Was. And I know the first thing on your mind is why the gloves? Well, these are jeweler's gloves, otherwise known as inspection gloves. And you can get them, they're just cotton gloves, and you can get them as cheap as 50 cents a pair off of someplace like eBay. And I really recommend doing that when you're dealing with vintage items, especially paper items and autographs, as well as coins. You do not want the oil from your fingers on these products. The oils from your fingers are like one of the worst enemies to comic books. Speaking of which, moisture is an enemy of your vintage pulp, like this Golden Age Lone Ranger here, Lone Ranger number 4. If in the wintertime, wherever you have your comics stored is probably fine because of the dry air. In the summertime, it might not be a bad idea even just to have a fan in that room to circulate the air so moisture doesn't accumulate anywhere. Sunlight is also your enemy. Do not have them exposed to direct sunlight. If you've got them displayed in a room that has open windows, you may even want to get UV tinting for your windows, which you can get an adhesive UV that you just paste on your window, and it just looks like a regular tinted window. It'll make a world of difference when it comes to this kind of stuff. And more importantly, um, when you bag these, this bag and this board are acid free. And that's very important because if you ever noticed comics turning brown or having stains on the white part, it's because the ink and the paper is interacting with either the plastic or the cardboard. The chemicals, they don't set well with each other, and it causes stains. Get acid free, it'll last a lot longer. Another trick I like to use with these, this is Gold Key for this Lone Ranger number 4. And Whitman also used to have this problem, as well as a few other manufacturers. There's nothing on this to indicate what issue number this is, and you don't want to be opening and closing this 100 times. Just take a little piece of paper, stick it in the back with a number on it so you know which one it is. That way you don't have to fool with it too much. You could also use a Mylar sleeve, like I've done here with this Amazing Spider-Man number 64. Hard Mylar sleeve, acid-free board on the inside, if you want to use a board. These I don't like too much because a lot of times they can actually trap your comic in here. This one is oversized. This is like a Silver Age book and a Golden Age sleeve. I recommend getting the sleeve a little bit bigger so you don't have to pinch it to get it out, because that's your danger right here. You're going to have to reach in up here and grab all this to get it out. I would slide it out from the board like that. I don't want to touch the comic and apply any pressure to it if I can help it, but you may be forced to if your Mylar sleeve is more conforming. That's, like I said, that's why I like to use the Golden Age size as opposed to a traditional Silver Age size for books like this. It would be too tight, especially with a board. If you don't have the room, I wouldn't even use a board. I'd leave the board completely out. Your comic could end up getting trapped in there. One other issue that I personally have with comics, and you see this a lot in comic shops, and they have to do it: tape on the back to seal this up. I don't like using tape. I don't like using tape because there's a risk of the tape snagging on the front of the comic book and permanently damaging the cover or the back. If that tape touches the outside of your comic, it will peel off the image. You can't avoid it. There's nothing that you can do. I know in comic stores they always tape them. The reason that they always tape them is because they don't want people opening and closing their books 100 times. And people do like to try to keep this airtight, but you can also fold that flap under. If you have to put tape on the back of your comic book, then every time you open it, I suggest folding that tape, or just completely removing it and using a new piece when you close it back up, rather than risk shredding your comic. And this one's not worth too much. This is pretty common, so I'm not too concerned about it. I haven't screwed with this one, but if I do open this up, that tape is gone. I'm going to get rid of it completely, rather than risk shredding that book. And while we're on the subject, I'm going to show you this one here really quick. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 59, and this is an important issue because it's the first full appearance of Mary Jane Watson, if I remember correctly. Now, take a close look. You see that right there? The previous owner had this bagged and boarded with tape, and when he pulled the comic out, the tape grabbed the comic right there and shredded the lettering off, which is why I warn about that tape. I know you want to try to keep these airtight because the less air that's circulating through these, and this is really excellent condition. Otherwise, the condition of this this book is really nice, but that tape really hurt the cover. So like I said, I know you want to keep it airtight. There's better ways to do it. It already mostly is, because it's pressed down into this sleeve, or it's bagged and boarded. But if you're really desperate, you can even tuck that flap on the bag and board into the back of the board so that it's not on the comic, and then untuck it later. You can do that very gently. But as I said, if you must tape it, I would recommend disposing of the tape every time when you open it back up, or at least folding it, so that there's no risk to your vintage comics. Now, what we're going to do here is I've got Silver Age Star Trek number 2, and you see how I'm holding it, being very careful with it. If I need to look inside, I want to be careful with how I open it to examine it. I don't want to be rough with it, and I don't want my fingers touching it. You want to keep your fingers off of that stuff and handle it with the gloves like I am if you can. Whatever age has done to this already, you don't need to add to it. Acid-free board, you can get a bundle of them, like a bundle of about 100 of these, for around $10, $11. Acid-free bag, same price, $10, $12 for about 100 of these. Use the board to insert the comic. Don't use the comic. And pay special attention to that bottom right corner. A lot of Golden and Silver Age comics, and even Platinum Age comics that you're going to come across, that corner is all bent up because of how it was shoved into these bags. Take the lip, the top of the board, and just guide it in. Don't use the comic to press it in. If you need to get it out, you get it out the same way. Press the bottom of the board against that sleeve to bring the end out, and then you can grab that cardboard and pull it through the top without even touching the comic book. Press the bottom. Don't try to reach in there and pinch that top to grab it out. You're going to end up with a permanent mark on the top, and you don't want that. The less you handle this, the better. A lot of people are really good about keeping their vintage books out of the light, and about moisture, and about having them packed up neatly, but then they manhandle it and they get their greasy paws all over these books. And like I said, I look really anal retentive sitting here in these gloves, but these books are not going to get damaged any further than how I originally got them, because I'm going to baby the hell out of them. And 50 cents for a pair of gloves, it's worth the investment. So that's just a few little tips on caring for these. And of course, if you're not going to display them, you don't want to stack them on top of each other. That's another thing I want to point out real quick. If you have to stack them on top of each other, if you've got a bunch of comics, you want to invert them. You want each one to be facing a different direction, up, down, up, like that. If you have to stack them like this, when you stack them all spine to spine this way, then one side is going to get higher than the other, and it's going to angle towards the opening. And that's also where you get a lot of rolling in vintage comic books. You know how like on the back it kind of rolls forward, and on the back it looks screwed up because it's rolling against the spine here. That's how come that happens, because they're stacked on top of each other. So like I said, just flip every other one around if you've got to stack them. Otherwise, the way they should be stacked is straight up and down. Straight up and down in a conforming box, so that they're not laying flat at all if you have to store them in a box. And of course, there are boxes that you can buy specifically for comic books and get them to conform. Like this is a Golden Age comic. It's got a Golden Age backing board, a Golden Age size bag, and I would stack them up in a Golden Age box. Always get the proper sizes for whatever it is that you need to work with. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any other questions or suggestions, just go ahead and put them in the blogs below. Hope to see you again at What Once Was.